Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm all right, Rachel. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to be recording today. You know why?
Why? Today is the day.
We're wearing our Talking with Tech t-shirts. We have 2 Talking with Tech lives today, and one of them is with our Patreon, which I'm most excited for because I feel like it's like our super fans.
By the time people hear this, it'll be over. You'll have missed it, but you will be able to get the recording up in Patreon eventually. I think we're going to put it up there, and then it'll eventually go in the podcast feed. So even if you missed it, that's okay. You'll eventually get to hear it.
Exactly. So what's going on with you, Chris? Tell me what's new.
I want to tell you about a Greek story. Have you ever heard of Pygmalion? Do you know who Pygmalion is?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so there's this scientific principle called the Pygmalion Effect, and I looked it up. Where does this word Pygmalion come from? And apparently it's a Greek story of this person who maybe was a king and a sculptor, and he created a woman out of, I don't know, ivory or marble or something. I don't know. He sculpted this woman. And then the gods, because he just wanted this woman to be so real, I guess, bequeathed it to him and made the woman come to life because he believed in it so much. And that's why there's this name of this scientific effect called the Pygmalion Effect. Have you heard of the Pygmalion Effect?
I do think I have, yes.
Right? It sounds vaguely familiar, right? Like it's one of those things like, I think I heard about that. So here's what it is and why I'm bringing it up here on our podcast. So the Pygmalion Effect is essentially this. It's the idea that the way you treat somebody is the way they will respond to how you're treating them. Or if you believe in somebody and though you act in a way that you believe in somebody, that will happen, right? And so a classic example here is something called the Rosenthal experiment, which is a Dr. Rosenthal took 2 sets of mice and he put them in with 2 different groups of grad students. And they had to say, okay, time how fast the mice can make it through this maze. The maze was the same. And the mice were the same, like same, type of mice. And the only difference, the only variable was some mice were labeled, these were smart mice, intelligent mice, and other mice were just kind of normal, average mice. And by just having those labels, guess which group of mice performed the tasks faster and better?
The smart ones.
The smart ones, right? But they weren't smart ones. They're just mice. It was just the fact that the grad students who were with the mice thought that these were smarter mice, that they turned out to do better on their performance tests, like getting through the maze. And then this, I don't know all of the exact names of all of the experiments, but this has been replicated with students where you give students tests and you say, these are the students or these are the ones that, you're really good at this task, then you'll be better at that task because I believe in that task. Another classic one I've heard of is the science behind giving kids science like lab coats before taking a science test. All right, you're putting your thinking cap on, right? You're putting your science robe on. So as you go in to take the science test, you put on your lab coat and you do better because you think you're a scientist, right? And I bring all of that up because if I've been listening back to the podcast, and a theme lately, but a theme for always, has been kind of not believing in the kids, you know what I mean? Not expecting that presuming potential that we always talk about. And sometimes it can feel, when we have that conversation about presuming potential, it can feel sort of wishy-washy, like, oh, you're just a bleeding heart that thinks that, the kid's gonna... But there's actually science behind it and Greek gods apparently behind it, but mostly the science is what I'm caring about, that says if you think that way and treat people that way and act that way, then people respond that way,
I think it's so important to remember the power of our minds. And I think that it's actually funny. It's not related to AAC or education at all. But I was listening to this podcast. It was on health, and it was talking about the power of your mind. If you hear a rattling in your closet and you think, oh my goodness, like there's someone in my closet who's going to come out and hurt me, you have a stress response that's triggered, right? Like your stomach, you have a pit in your stomach, you start sweating, your heart starts racing, all because you had a thought, right? And so it's just a perfect example of how like our thoughts really affect everything that we do. And I feel like it's kind of similar with, the story that you just talked about, Chris, because it's just like the power of believing. It's the power of having and holding on to a belief means you're more likely to spread that belief. You're more likely to act in a way that supports that belief. And so it's like these are the kind of things that we need to be really fostering in schools and all of the work that we do.
Another example, and I wish I had looked up what the scientific studies here, but along those lines, the power of your mind, I've heard the analogy of if you wanted to get better at basketball, and you've probably heard me talk about this, it's my least favorite sport and I'm terrible at it, right? But let's say I wanted to get better at shooting baskets, right? Well, one thing I could do is nothing. I don't have to shoot any baskets. Or I could go out and practice every day. And if I went out and practiced every day, I might get better. Having someone coach me would even be better. But there is an intermediate step that I think goes between doing nothing and shooting baskets. And that is visualizing myself shooting baskets, And I feel like that is maybe a part that we're missing when it comes to, or maybe it's something we can emphasize more when it comes to modeling on a communication device, doing intervention with students who use communication devices, is what if we visualized the experience that we want to have? Or if you're a parent at night and you're falling asleep, you're laying in bed, you kind of visualize yourself modeling on a communication device, which seems very low stress and very like you don't have to do anything but lay there and fantasize about it, visualize what it might be like. And just that alone, that power of your mind will help you.
Well, I have to tell you, Chris, that when I am faced with something that I find challenging or I think I'm going to be potentially nervous for, and the first thing that came into my mind was, remember right before everything hit with the pandemic, I had that court case that I was on?
Yes.
So I practice visualization when I have, any type of event where I'm like, oh no, like I'm going to be nervous and this is going to be hard. I sit there and I just imagine me doing awesome. I'm like, what are the things I'm saying? What is the reaction of the crowd or the whoever's there. And like, even when I present at conferences, I like to go and see what room I'm presenting in. So like, I might get there a day early and I'll figure out what room I'm in. I'll just like peek in and I'll be like, oh, here's my room. Cool. Now I can visualize myself being awesome in this room.
I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Got to go find out where I'm presenting the night before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just feel like it's so important. And it's so effective. Like, I feel like if I don't, and there's been times where I'm like, oh, like, you just like get busy, like whatever. But if I make an intention to visualize myself, succeeding, then I'm more likely going to succeed, right? And I feel like there's definitely research to support that too. I think visualization is a very strong practice that a lot of people, use to do a variety of things. So I think it's super important to kind of think outside the box a little bit, because we don't know how all of these things kind of come together, but we know what not doing them does, right? Like that's what most people are not doing these things. And so we know what that, can lead to, but the potential of what else could happen if we start using the power of our mind and just like the belief. I think that there's just so much to be said for fully 100% believing in the students that you work with, because I think that's infectious. I think it's contagious. This idea that like, well, yeah, like I do believe that this student can learn how to communicate and this student can learn how to read and can learn how to type. It's such a powerful belief. And when people ask me like, what do you think like has made your practice so successful, or like you being a good clinician? And I always go back to like, I believe that kids are capable of amazing things, and I will work tirelessly until they do it, right? Until like they show me, yes, I could do this. And it's because of that belief. And then it's also because of the hope that I give the parents that I work with, because oftentimes they've lost hope that like progress is possible. They've been met with a lot of different challenges and practitioners perhaps that maybe didn't believe. And so I feel like what I can give them more so than anything is that hope that things will get better and that we can do things to move the needle.
Now, you keep using that word belief and hope, right? And that's exactly what I think we're trying to say here, is that word belief can often feel like an antithesis to science. Like, well, I believe in whatever higher power, or I don't, but it's a belief and I don't really have any facts to back it up, that what we're trying to say here is there's actually facts, this whole thing, the Pygmalion effect and scientific principles that back up the reason behind presuming potential and that word belief here. They are not opposites, belief and science in this case. They are aligned.
I love it. I love it. Chris, what's our interview today?
Oh, well, wait, before we get to the interview, there's something else. I have to ask you to visualize, and everyone else who's kind of listening right now, if you wouldn't mind visualizing with me, okay? Will you do it with me, Rachel? Can I invite you to visualize with me?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're listening today to this podcast, visualize yourself later on today participating in a Zoom pre-launch party for the new book. So we're having a Zoom pre-launch party on December 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So what's that? That's 5 your time? Am I doing the math right?
Yes.
Right? 5 Pacific. What the party is you can go over to inclusive365.com. There's a banner at the top that says register for the Zoom party, and it's just completely free. It's like the party is free. The book costs money. But the party is just going to be an hour long of us and we hope like 500 of our closest friends showing up to celebrate this, the pre-launch of this new book. We're going to talk about some of the strategies that are in the book, but we're doing it in a very like party fun, let's have fun sort of spirit, like because it's a holiday time, right? So I'm going to have my ugly sweater on. I've got a holiday hat that I'm going to wear. We've got a whole thing going on, and we want you to be a part of it. We want you specifically, Rachel, but of course everyone listening to come on over and be a part of it because we are really trying to make this book a big splash in the general ed world. And the way we do that is by getting the word out.
I am super excited. Chris, you know I love a holiday party, and I'm excited that we can still have a holiday party even though we're on opposite coasts and we're in the middle of a pandemic. Can't stop us. So I will be there, and I hope that all of our listeners will be there too, because I know firsthand how long this book took and how you spent so much time and energy. I saw it, you guys. He was very busy, and I'm super excited that the book is completed, and I can't wait to get a copy of it. So I'd love to be there to celebrate with you, and I hope our listeners come too.
So you can learn more about the book at inclusive365.com, and right there on that splash page, you'll see a link to say, sign up for the holiday party. But it's happening today, the day this podcast, what we're recording right now, is supposed to air. So you might have to be one of the first people that listens and then and jump on over. Speaking of invitations, who else I'd like to invite is Michaela Ball. So I'd love for Michaela to come. And Michaela, that's who our interview is today. It's our second part of our interview with Michaela Ball.
So without further ado, let's head into part 2 of our coaching with Michaela.
We're excited to remind everyone about one of our favorite events of the year, the annual ATIA Conference. ATIA stands for the Assistive Technology Industry Association, and, like so many events, this year the conference will be held online. The ATIA team has designed the conference in a way that provides attendees more opportunities for flexible scheduling and different registration options. It's going to be awesome.
The conference, called ATIA 2021 AT Connected, will be held online January 25th through 28th and February 1st through 4th. The conference will feature the same professional development opportunities we've all come to rely on from ATIA, including an education strand dedicated to AAC, along with CEUs available on more than 150 courses.
Plus, there's a ton of flexible scheduling options, so you can attend some sessions live and catch up on others that were recorded. These recordings will be available through June of 2021, so you'll have plenty of time to watch them. This year, there's also a range of registration options, including full conference, single strand, 1 day, and even a free option. With all of this flexibility and a free registration option, there's absolutely no reason not to attend.
Chris and I will be there too. We're leading the course called Designing and Delivering Empowering Experiences to Teach Language Using AAC. This 6-hour course is a virtual seminar held over 2 Saturdays, January 30th and February 6th, both starting at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. We've put together an experience that allows you to take a deep dive into AAC. You can register by going to bit.ly/TWT ATIA 21.
It's a great example of one of the flexible options you have for ATIA 2021. You can pick and choose the sessions and schedules that work best for you, and you can even take an intensive course like our virtual seminar to really hone in on a topic that matters most to you.
And that's not all. Guess what? Talking with Tech listeners can get a special discount when registering for this conference. To get 20% off the full conference registration, go to atia.org/talkingwithtech and enter the discount code ATIA21Vision, all caps.
So head on over to atia.org/talkingwithtech and enter the registration code ATIA2001Vision today. See you at ATIA. Well, I was going to ask you a question, Michaela. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say since we have had new iPads purchased, we haven't seen them yet, but I'm hoping maybe we see them next week. And we are since August? We're about 2.5 months in, or am I just totally off? Yeah, I think it's been about 2.5 months. I guess changing things now versus down the road would be important.
Yeah, and like for a kid who has fine motor challenges, like I'm not giving them an iPad mini. Like we need to maximize like the screen size. And even if that means it's a little heavier and it's not as portable, like for me, it's like, it's really important. So I don't often recommend an iPad mini unless I'm working with a student who has like laser focused fine motor and they're, maybe a little bit older and they want it to be more discreet or portable. But otherwise, like, no.
Even if we're saying an early learners are still learning their fine motor. It's not like he's an expert piano player. Do you know what I mean? Or any kid is at that age.
Right.
Their fingers are still growing. They're still learning coordination. Any student, So it makes sense to have a little bit larger of an area.
I want to circle back because you had said...
Wait, before we circle back, I want to stick with fine motor just for a second.
Sure.
Okay.
So hold on to that thought. Along the lines of what Rachel was saying about fine motor exercises, do you know if he has OT and if you could do any sort of joint therapy with OT?
I am not sure about OT. That would be awesome. I know that the SLP, my supervising SLP, is usually really on it with being in contact with those outside professionals, and she hasn't mentioned anything. I know that there's no other SLP, so there's no private practice for speech.
Well, regardless if there is or there isn't, stuff you could do. Rachel already sort of gave you one idea about apps that she uses to, do finger poking or swiping or things like that. I think there's lots of fun practical stuff like, poking Play-Doh and doing like putting little paints in Tupperware and cut a hole in the top of the Tupperware. So you have to get your finger into the hole to get the paint on it, that kind of stuff that can all help with finger isolation and targeting in a fun, goofy way, tickle the belly of the bear that I have, and you have to target it. That kind of stuff I think can be real fun.
Awesome.
I'm going to add one more like idea for like a tool. There are these books called Polka Dot. Have you heard of this?
Oh, we have those. Yeah, they're awesome.
I swear those books have like taught all of my kids how to use their device. I'm just
funny.
like, I just
that's awesome.
like, listen, parents, like buy this on Amazon and like, we'll be fine in like 2 weeks.
Wait, what is it? If people are not familiar with the Polka Dot books.
Okay, I'll explain it. So it's basically this board book and there are these little dots and they're basically it's a little circle and you have to isolate your, index finger and you have to push them. And when you push them, it pops. Kind of like you're popping, what is that stuff that you get in packages, like the little bubble wrap? Like kind of like you're popping bubble wrap. So you can work on counting. It's really fun. And my kids love it. Like they love the sound of it. They love it. I even love it. I feel like it's really rewarding. I'm like, okay, I'll keep pushing this. But again, we're working on isolating a finger and pressing, and that can make a huge difference for kids who are just starting to learn fine motor skills. Now I'm going to circle back to what you were saying, Michaela, because I think it's important to talk about. You said something to the effect of, I wanted to give this student more words, but how do I decide which words I give? Right? Was that kind of the sentiment of what you were saying?
Yeah, when we were trying to see what should be on a home board, and we only have an option of 20 cells currently. How do you make those tough decisions?
I'm going to give you an idea. I'm going to give you an idea. And what is the student motivated by? Like, what are they excited about? Like, what gets them like really pumped? Like, what do they want to talk about?
Animals, the movie Frozen. He likes jumping, bouncing, sliding, all those physical games. I feel like that's what I see in the classroom.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is like he likes sensory movement.
Yes.
He likes animals, and he likes, what was it? Watching YouTube channel?
Frozen, the movie.
Frozen. It was watching something.
He sounds like every other kid. Every kid I know loves to do that kind of stuff, you know?
Right.
Exactly. So then let's think about it. Like, what are some core words that you could use that really hone in on his passions?
Well, we have in, on. We have want. I could see stuff like jump, go. If goes there, I'd put stop, because I just envision that you can model go, but you can also model stop to then go again.
What about for Frozen?
Watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about for Frozen?
See or look, I think I'd put.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like those sound like really good places to start. Let me ask you this. Are you doing any kind of targeted intervention with specific core words? I know you're doing a lot of aided language input, which is really important, but are you like focusing on, 2 words to get more independent and spontaneous use? Or are you taking the approach of just kind of like modeling language that comes up as it comes up?
Well, so I started with modeling language as it comes up, and then within the classroom, because all of that I'm doing is in the classroom with him. And then we started sitting down with their small group and their snack time, and then I started modeling want and all done and in and on. We started focusing our targets basically after seeing the activities a couple times to really see what we could focus on. We don't, because when he gets pulled out, he focuses on speech. We don't target something outside of the classroom right now.
What is he using spontaneously on the device?
It was in and on, all done, but I've only seen all done once.
How often would you say he's using these words? Like, is it once a day he's starting to use it? Is he using it every routine?
Once or twice every routine.
And spontaneously, like no one's prompting him to say all done. He's just like, I have something to say, all done.
I'm not sure, because we've started the activity. Let's say it's like a small group. We all sit down, we start the activity. I've modeled a couple of things, whether it's, let's put it on, so we're going to use on, that kind of thing. And then, it takes 5 minutes or so before he's like, I'll start exploring. So I'm not sure I would call that totally spontaneous, because he also is doing what I'm doing and not doing it first.
You're right. I wouldn't call it spontaneous either. I think that's prompted, even if it's a delay prompt.
Okay. That's my gut. So basically, as far as the device goes, nothing is spontaneous yet.
So what do you think would be a good motivating word that you can use in a lot of different contexts that he's super excited about to kind of laser in on one specific target?
I think go, because you can go to the slide. You can go down the slide. You can go to the next activity. You can go home, Just go is awesome. I feel like that's probably where I would start.
Go, Michaela.
I love that. No, and go is where I actually start with a lot of emergent communicators using a device, because it's so awesome. You can use it across like so many different settings. Like you could be doing it even like when you're painting, and like you could get messy with the paint and say, ready, set, go, and stir the paint. I mean, there's literally like a million different ways that you can use that word. So, and it sounds like he's really motivated by sensory stuff, and he loves like movement. So it's literally like for him specifically, it's a perfect word choice.
And I bet with the word go, you can come up with lots of ideas of how you would integrate it, throughout the day. How do you think you could get the teacher to model go throughout the day?
Well, I think our biggest trick in the classroom is getting the device near the student or having a dedicated location for it, because this is the first device this year. And I know last year, I don't think they, even though they tried it or were starting to use it, I don't know. The classroom doesn't have a lot of kids with devices already. So these are habits that haven't been built yet in the classroom. I think we need to start with that. Is have a dedicated place that it lives so that the student knows to go get it and it's always in that one spot, or it's with the student. I think we need to start with that. And then in 2 weeks, I'm supposed to be teaching the paraprofessionals and the teacher about aided language input. So there's that.
Is there anyone else in the environment that you could teach?
I would love to teach the mom, but I think that would have to be a separate meeting. But yeah, I would love to teach the mom, because that's the thing. These kiddos right now, they're only at school for part of the day. So what are they doing with the rest of their time?
Well, perhaps you could record when you're teaching your team at school. Perhaps you could record it and send it to mom.
That's a great idea. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, let's maximize our time.
Do you know if one of your administrators will also be in the training?
I don't, but actually, usually they're not. This is like a teacher paraeducator weekly meet thing that I'm coming in and doing it during. But that would be awesome. What kind of which administrators would be the ones I should ask for?
Well, most schools have what's called a special ed designee. So they're the person that is the administrator, that is the one that sits in the IEP meetings. And they're sort of the ones that are the, for lack of a better words, like in charge of the special ed department in their school, right? They're the ones that ultimately that answer for it and keep everyone compliant and help design the instructions. So I'd be looking for who is that person in my school that might help foster this, so the paraprofessionals, see that there's some investment there. Do you know what I mean? That it's not just, oh, who's this person? I could see, not knowing these paraprofessionals at all, oh, who's this grad student coming in teaching us this thing? Do you know what I mean? Well, if your administrator is there and is valuing it and asking you, questions and supporting you, it sends a message, and even if not, an email afterwards going, hey, I heard you recorded it, and everyone's copied on the email, because maybe logistically they can't be there. Could I see that email as well? No, suddenly, again, it's important. Oh, can I see that video as well? So I feel like that sort of it's a very small lift for an administrator to either be there or to ask for it afterwards, to learn a huge concept. You know what I mean? Like that's super important concept. So
that's really smart.
What are ways that you can support the teacher to incorporate more aided language input for all of the students? Because I think that oftentimes we have these conversations about specific students, but teachers are really concerned about how they can help all of their students at once. And we know that visual supports help all students, especially early learners. So what are some ways that you think you can start incorporating kind of a classroom approach to aided language input?
Well, I love Word of the Week. I feel like it's a super safe way to start that conversation and not make it overwhelming, because it's like, here's this one word. We're going to go over it. We're going to highlight it, and we're going to show you where it is in the device. So I love Word of the Week. And so I'd love to implement a program like that, but I also want to connect it to the curriculum our teachers already have, because they've built what they've done. And they've been doing it for years and adapting it and everything else. So I don't want to say, hey, we're going to derail what you're doing. I want to come in and I want it to feel like a compliment to what they're doing. But what I also want to do is and I'm not sure about this idea, but I want to print out the student's core board and have it laminated and have it in several locations in the classroom.
Great. Love that idea.
So like for small group, they're, at their large group when they're sitting on a totally different end of the room. And the cool thing is this classroom, because it's technically a special ed classroom, even though it's a mix of typical kids and special ed, kiddos on IEPs. they put everything into visuals. So they have a huge visual schedule. They're used to using visuals with everything. So I think this isn't a far-fetched thing to add a visual for language or for a specific word.
Where else could you put those visuals?
Okay, I've been debating about key rings or like on our cards. I'm afraid they're too little though. I'm not sure.
Yeah. You're talking about putting them in the classroom. Where else do the kids go?
It's right now it's classroom and bathroom and sometimes outside.
Gotcha. Do you think they could go on the playground as well?
Yeah, I don't know if they'd stay. I think that would have to be a larger conversation with administration to see if they could stay, but I think that's awesome.
I've seen where you get the key rings, like you're saying, but they hang up outside at the playground, knowing they're going to get destroyed. You have to relaminate them. They're not a permanent fixture, but that's okay. You print it and relaminate it. And you get parent volunteers to maybe do that whenever it's necessary, or even student volunteers if there's kids in the upper grades that want to. That's their job. I got to go out and check the visuals, make sure they're that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay.
The other thing that I like to do with parents, but I think it could easily be done with teachers, is use visual supports with words that are predictable within that routine. So, for example, next to the sink, on and off, really low-hanging fruit. And then what you could do as, the clinician is take a part of your session and show how you would use it. Because that's oftentimes like, we do all of the great like laminating and printing and all the things, and then we hang them up, but we kind of skip the step, the most important step, which is how do you actually use this with kids and facilitate this visual support. And so that could be a really good one too, like having hanging up at the door. So the teacher can start getting into the habit of saying like, we're going to the bathroom.
So it's a visual support for the kids, but it's also for anybody who's interacting with them.
Exactly. And what you do then is, one, you normalize this, right? You normalize AAC, which I think is really important. If everybody in the class does it, everybody in the class feels comfortable with it, and we're not targeting our child who has communication difficulties and requires AAC. If all his peers are using it and touching it and all of those things, then he feels more accepted, and it's normalized in the classroom. And also it's just like it's building the habit. It's building the routine, because teachers don't always think through the lens of like visual supports, right? How can I represent my language visually for a student? So visual supports are a really great way to do that. And we already do them oftentimes in classrooms of early learners with transition schedules. That's like the visual support that every teacher's got down, because they need that visual support in order to get the kids to do all the things that they need them to do. One of my favorite things to do with those visual schedules is very easily you can add the word go to those visual schedules. Like, where are we going to go next? It's time to go to our seat. Let's go to our seat. That's like a really simple kind of low-hanging fruit.
Can I ask you a question about that? So let's say we have like either vertical or horizontal, but it's got single visual cues as to what's happening next. So then would you just put it right next to go and then activity? Go, activity?
Well, no, not necessarily. It depends on like kind of what it looks like. Also, I've seen them that hang up in the classroom. I've seen kids have individual ones. There's a lot of different variations, but simply having the go icon at the top so that you can touch it when you say go. But it doesn't always have to be like, if it's, sand art, it's like maybe we don't go to sand art, we play sand art, but it feels like something where when you could have the potential to use that word go, then you just touch it and it's right at the top.
What do you think about having the whole core board, like you said, around the environment next to the visual schedule? So you could use go or play or in or any number of those in the combination, so you get that repetition with variety.
I think that would be awesome. I think the way the classroom's set up, that would work because in the front there's a big visual schedule and there's plenty of room to have a big core board. But in other areas of the room where they have these schedules, there's not so much room, so I don't necessarily think I'd do it over there. But I really like this idea of using a single word, because we also have students in the classroom who are at the 1 and 2 word level.
AAC helps everybody.
It's amazing.
The other thing that I'll add that I actually just did with a family, this was like a month or so ago. They were just having a hard time using even a communication board. I was doing the low tech thing, and it just, for whatever reason, they just were like, we're not using it. And I'm like, okay, let's focus on one word. Just do one word. And the word was go. And what we did was I printed out the homepage. But what I did was I grayed out. I did like a light gray on the rest of the board, so it really targeted just that one word. You could still see all of the other ones, but that one was highlighted. And then this month, it's all done. And so we've made these kind of boards where we're like targeting in on one. The other ones are still visible, as a way to kind of build that capacity. Eventually I'm going to transition to like a full communication board, but for whatever reason, this particular case, we needed to do something that was actually going to work and achievable. And part of it is like trying to kind of troubleshoot and talk with communication partners, whether that be parents or teachers, on like what would work for you. And like when I mentioned this idea, mom was like, yes, let's do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm excited that you're excited. So it's really just having conversations like that with communication partners to figure out what would work for you in your classroom.
Can I ask you a specific question about that? Mm-hmm. When you are highlighting those words for the parent, so let's say you're on word 1, do you do one word highlighted? Well, you have one word highlighted for your first word. The second word do you keep the first word highlighted, so then you have 2 words?
Yes.
And then you have 3 words the following. Okay.
And I found that when I've done this in the past, I don't have to keep doing this forever. This is like let's get our feet wet and like get used to this. And then eventually it's not overwhelming. But what happens is that when sometimes you introduce a core board, everybody is like, whoa, too many words. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's like a really easy way to just say like, it's okay. Like, everyone calm down. Like, we're just going to focus on go. And then build off of that.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
Can I throw up a word of caution for you? It's a little imp I'm going to put on your shoulder and whisper in your ear when you're in the classroom. Oftentimes when you're modeling and a teacher it's the first time, or like you said, it's kind of new to the teacher, new to the environment, the device becomes, and they learn it, right? You're going to do this training for the paraprofessionals and the teacher and possibly an administrator and the parent. It often becomes a beacon, like a bullhorn for the device becomes a bullhorn for the teacher to kind of to bark commands at the student. Go out, go in. It becomes, and that pushes the AAC away from the student rather than draws them in. So the imp that I want to put on your shoulder and to watch for is 1, for that to happen. And then 2, what I want the imp to be whispering into your ear is, uh-oh, you spotted it. What can you do to prevent it? What can you do to make the student want to say go? So for instance, I'll just throw one idea out, is the whole game of like red light, green light, and especially in social distancing, it's like, you're far away, go, and you're moving closer, go, you're moving closer, stop, you're too close, something like that. The student controlling adults, the student controlling peers, the student controlling older students that might have fun playing that game, mom and siblings, those are all like easy ways for it to become not about him following the directions. We already know he can do that. He's got a higher receptive language. It's him using it expressively.
Okay. That's great to know, because I do not have the foresight.
And I love that, Chris.
You write me and go, the imp whispered in my ear, Chris.
I love that, Chris. And the other thing that I like to differentiate, because we know that visual supports, they help children learn how to expressively use language. They also help children learn how to receptively understand language and follow directions. So I used to work in preschools when I was first starting off as an SLP, and I was using visual supports with everyone. I was like, quiet hands and sit down and all the things. And so one way to differentiate is like the key ring is for when I need you to understand what I'm saying and follow a directive, versus the device is these are his words. And if he wouldn't want to say it, we're not going to, either make him try to say it or like use the device in that capacity. So teaching communication partners, would the student actually want to say this? I give the example, like I have this client who like kids hated bath time and they're like, we put bath time on the device. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, every time we go to the bath, like we hit it and like we make them say it. I'm like, like, no, like unless we're teaching them like no bath, like I'm not interested in like making the device something that they hate and associating it with a demand. It already is a demand when we're tempting and pausing and all these things and expecting communication out of a student. But if it's something like sit down or wait, oftentimes I like get a device of a student that I'm working with and I only, see them on a consult basis and I see like waiting on the homepage, like they've added that button. And I'm like, do they like to tell people to wait? Because that's something that they like are really interested in. And they're like, no, like we say waiting when we want them to wait. I'm like, like I'd rather have a visual cue card, something we print out and laminate and have on a key ring that we show for waiting versus have that on the device.
That's really good to know. And I really like the physical differentiation because I feel like that's easy to explain to teachers and paraprofessionals and other professionals. That's awesome.
Slightly different, but also as a physical differentiation is that you mentioned a heavy use of, I'm going to say, linear visual schedules, either horizontal or vertical. But a much lesser known strategy is, and I'm going to use the big fancy word here, but you could just say nonlinear, but the big fancy word is amorphous visual schedules. And the idea is that maybe at the beginning of the year, they have this linear, sort of where we are now, linear, horizontal. But then imagine those same visuals next to the linear or next to the horizontal is a blank one with a Velcro spot on it, and then a field of those same visuals around. And the student, at first it's just the teacher pointing, this is where you're going, this is next, this is next. But then the next step is for the student to rip it off of a piece of Velcro and put it next to them, like almost like a matching activity, so that you have this amorphous visual schedule, so that the student now takes ownership of it and they're physically doing it, and then eventually you take the first one, that linear visual schedule, and you can remove that, and they're just, okay, what comes next? And they're just pulling them down, making their own schedule. And in that way, you progress through the year. It's not like we always use this visual schedule. We use it selectively at the beginning, middle, and end of the year, moving through this progression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. I see something similar, but it's still a linear schedule in one of the classrooms because they're pulling their schedule off and taking it to where they're going.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, and it ties the meaning. The other reason I bring that up now is that it ties the meaning to the visual. It's like that's what that symbol means. Is it means I go to this thing and that I do this thing. It teaches what this picture means.
So, Michaela, do you have any other questions? Like, I feel like I definitely want to like kind of like reiterate all the points that we touched on. But is there any other like thing that is kind of coming up for this student specifically?
No, I think my struggle is finding the balance between encouraging the use of sign language and making the classroom a place where a speech device is used and demonstrated and it's inviting and all that. So
Michaela, I've been reading Karen Erickson's book, just read the first chapter and a half or so, right? And she's got this great line in there. It's so classic. She says, students will learn what we teach them. It's very simple, and yeah, to your point about trying to decide between the device and facilitating the environment of the communication partners and helping train them and understand how to facilitate the use of the device versus spending time working on sign language versus speech. I feel like this is why I asked the question, where the end game, because you have to choose where you want to spend your time now, because what you teach them is what they'll learn, So if you spend most of your time doing sign language, then there's only so many minutes in the day. There's an opportunity cost, It means it's minutes you're not teaching something else. So it's an important decision. I like to think of it at the end. Well, what do I want the student to look like at the end? Because they'll learn what I'm teaching them,
Yeah, I think, so to better answer your question, you've honed me in a little bit there. I do want to focus on the device because it has the more robust application. I wouldn't discourage the signs, but I definitely would do the language input in the mode of the device based on this kiddo.
If the student signed something, you would respond to the sign, but you might also model it on the device so he can see it in multiple ways, but you wouldn't demand him to press it on the device. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what I need to teach. That's a big key piece of what I need to teach, when I do this little in-service.
Yes. No double demands.
The mode doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's one of the most important things when you're, because sometimes we work with students who don't have speech. And it's like, okay, we have a device, now they have a voice, but otherwise they don't have much of anything sometimes. But for students who are multi-modality communicators, they're using some speech, they're using some signs. We always run into the issue of this idea of like a double demand. Like, you told me sign, now say it on the device. You said it on the device, now try to say it. Like, if we were being told all day long to say things twice, like, now say it in Spanish, Rachel. Now say it in Mandarin. Like, we would be so frustrated. And so that's something that I really try to communicate to teams who have students who are multimodality communicators is like, accept what they said, model without expectation. It's as simple as that.
Michaela, can I give you one more piece of advice here? As someone who has failed many times at training, my advice to you at training is to keep it small. You're going to see all the stuff, especially as someone who listens to every episode of this podcast very carefully. You're going to want to, I'm guessing here, you're going to want to, I know I always want to, shove too much in at once. It is the hardest skill I have had to learn, is to be patient and go, oh God, they need to know so much right now. Pick the one or two salient points that you think will make the biggest impact on the paraprofessionals, and then let it go. Like, we'll go, just wash your hands of it, or say, hey, when's the next time if you found this was useful? Because too much, if it's an hour, even if it's a half hour, you can cram a lot in there and it won't mean anything. You won't actually see the change.
Yeah. When you do trainings, do you have them practice and kind of coach themselves?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's what I was thinking would be probably most beneficial.
Awesome. Michaela, this was so great. Thank you for coming on and agreeing to let us record.
Of course.
I mean, of course, we're happy to help you because you're an amazing part of our team. And if we did not have you, we would not have this podcast. So everyone listening, just know that if it wasn't for Michaela, like, you wouldn't hear us every week.
It's true.
Well, really excited. Keep us posted on how this goes with this student. Kind of just to reiterate, like, of course, accept what he's already using as far as communication modalities, but then keep building out the device. I love how you're strategizing to figure out how you can support communication partners with the device, because ultimately that's going to lead to the most systemic change. And then I think kind of getting a little bit more laser focused with the vocabulary that you're choosing. And, I'd rather see him use a handful of words spontaneously and independently than, use, half the device, but have to be prompted in order to say something meaningful. So I think really getting strategic about the vocabulary and doing the, word of the week and all those things are going to be really effective strategies.
Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. I really appreciate it.
Of course. For Talking with Tech, I'm Rachel Beadle, joined by Chris Bouguet and our special guest, Michaela. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Hello, everyone. We wanted to wish you a bright holiday season this year and let you know that we are going to take the next 2 weeks off from posting content. So there'll be no new content in the main podcast feed on December 23rd and December 30th. The next content would come out on January 6th or 7th, somewhere around there. So enjoy the holidays, take this time to rest up, and have fun with your family and friends. And we'll see you in the new year.